At 15, Noah Carter owned exactly three things: a backpack, a pocket knife, and $37. The night his mother's boyfriend threw him out. Nobody came looking. For 3 days, he slept in abandoned sheds and under picnic shelters inside Black Pine National Forest. Then he found an old ranger cabin everyone thought had been empty for 40 years. People warned him not to stay there. They said the place was cursed. 3 weeks later, while trying to stop the floor from collapsing, Noah discovered a trapdoor hidden beneath an iron stove. And when he opened the cellar below, he found something that explained why a ranger had vanished without a trace in 1982. The first thing Noah Carter noticed that morning was that someone had taken the last 2 eggs. It wasn't a big deal. Not really. At least, that's what he told himself as he opened the refrigerator and stared at the empty carton. 2 eggs wouldn't change his life. 2 eggs wouldn't pay the electric bill. 2 eggs wouldn't stop Vince Maddox from drinking. But somehow, standing there in the dim yellow light of the trailer kitchen, Noah felt disappointed anyway. He had been thinking about those eggs since school ended the day before. A small reward, a decent breakfast, something that belonged to him. Now they were gone. Noah closed the refrigerator and reached for a loaf of bread. Only 1 slice remained. Of course. He laughed quietly, not because it was funny, because sometimes laughing hurt less than getting angry. The trailer was silent except for the humming refrigerator and the rain tapping against the roof. His mother had already left for work. The note she left sat on the counter. Back at 6. Love you. The handwriting looked rushed, almost nervous. Lately, all of her notes looked that way. Noah folded it carefully and slipped it into his pocket. He never threw them away. There was something sad about that fact. He knew it, but he couldn't help himself. By 7:30, he was walking toward the bus stop carrying his backpack. The rain had stopped. The air smelled like wet dirt and pine trees. Black Pine National Forest stretched across the hills beyond town. Most people barely noticed it. To Noah, it had always felt different. Alive, somehow. His father used to take him hiking there when he was younger. Back before hospitals. Back before bills. Back before cancer became a permanent member of the family. A pickup truck rolled past. Mud splashed onto Noah's jeans. The driver didn't slow down. Didn't apologize. Just kept going. Noah looked down at the stain and sighed. Perfect. It felt like one of those days. At school, things weren't much better. He spent lunch in the library, mostly because it was quiet, partly because he didn't have enough money to buy food. His friend Tyler eventually found him sitting between the history shelves. "You hiding again?" Tyler asked. "I'm reading." "You're sleeping." "I can do both." Tyler dropped into the chair beside him. "You coming Friday?" "What Friday?" "The game." Noah shrugged. "Maybe." They both knew he wasn't. Football games cost money. Everything cost money. Tyler hesitated, then lowered his voice. "How's Vince?" Noah immediately looked away. That was answer enough. Tyler nodded slowly. "Still bad. Worse." "You tell anyone." Noah laughed. "Tell who?" "Teachers. Police. Social workers." People always imagined adults fixed things. Most of the time, adults just passed problems to other adults. Eventually, the problem landed right back where it started. Noah changed the subject. They spent the rest of lunch talking about fishing, a new trail, a broken bicycle, anything except home, anything except Vince. When the final bell rang, Noah walked instead of taking the bus. It added nearly an hour to the trip, but it gave him time to think. The trailer appeared around a bend in the road just before sunset. The moment he saw Vince's truck parked outside, the knot in his stomach tightened. The truck wasn't supposed to be there. Vince should have been working. Noah didn't realize how loud a trailer could be until he was no longer inside one. For the first hour after Vince threw him out, all he could hear was silence. Not true silence. The sound of tires passing on distant roads, wind moving through pine trees, a dog barking somewhere in town, but none of the noises he had grown used to. No television, no slammed doors. No angry voices, no footsteps that made him wonder if trouble was coming. He walked until the lights of Ash Creek disappeared behind him. The backpack felt heavier with every mile, not because of what was inside, because of what wasn't. A home. Around midnight, he found an abandoned picnic shelter near the edge of Black Pine National Forest. The roof leaked. The wooden table had initials carved into it. Someone had spray-painted a smiley face on one of the support posts years ago. It wasn't much, but it was dry enough. Noah slept with his backpack wrapped around his arm. Twice he woke up convinced someone had stolen it. Both times it was still there. The second morning was worse. Hunger arrived. Real hunger, the kind that made thinking difficult. He ate the last granola bar from his backpack and drank water from a public restroom sink near a trailhead parking lot. By noon, he had already started calculating how long $37 could keep him alive. The answer wasn't encouraging. That afternoon, he met the old man. The stranger sat beside a fishing pond near the southern entrance to the forest. A faded green hat shaded most of his face. His tackle box looked older than Noah. The man glanced up as Noah approached. "You look lost." "I'm not." The old man nodded. That's usually what lost people say. For some reason, Noah smiled. The man noticed. "See, still got some fight left." Noah stopped walking. The old fisherman reached into a small cooler and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in paper. "You hungry?" Noah's stomach answered before he could. The old man chuckled. "Thought so." 5 minutes later, Noah sat beside him eating the sandwich. Turkey, cheese, mustard. Nothing had ever tasted better. The old man introduced himself as Earl Benson. Everyone in town knew Earl. At least everyone over 60 did. Retired mechanic, widower. Spent most days fishing and complaining about modern life. Earl never asked why Noah was alone. That made Noah trust him more. Most adults asked questions because they wanted answers. Earl seemed interested only in whether Noah had eaten. As the afternoon passed, they talked about fish, then weather, then hiking trails. Nothing important. Yet somehow Noah found himself staying longer than intended. Before leaving, Earl pointed toward the mountains. "If you're heading deeper into Black Pine, stay off Ridge Creek Trail." "Why?" "Bridge washed out last spring." "Thanks." Earl hesitated, then added, "And stay away from the old ranger cabin." Noah paused. "The what?" "The ranger cabin. Never heard of it." "Most people haven't." Earl's expression changed slightly, just enough for Noah to notice. "It's abandoned." So stay away from it." The answer wasn't really an answer, which immediately made Noah curious. That night, he slept beneath a cluster of pines. The ground was hard. The air was cold. Every sound seemed larger in the dark. Branches snapping, owls calling, leaves moving. Around midnight, he became convinced something was watching him. At 1 in the morning, he realized it was probably a squirrel. At 2, he wasn't so sure anymore. When dawn finally arrived, he felt exhausted. By the third day, his situation became more serious. His money was running low. His clothes smelled like smoke and dirt. The weather forecast, posted at a ranger station, warned of storms arriving later that week. For the first time, fear began replacing anger. Anger had kept him moving. Fear made him stop and think. What happened next? Where would he sleep next week? What about next month? That afternoon, he found a creek. The water was clean and fast-moving. Nearby, he discovered signs of an old trail, barely visible. Half reclaimed by forest, curiosity pulled him forward. 1 hour later, he noticed something strange. The trail wasn't natural. Someone had once maintained it. Cut logs still lined sections of the path. Old marker posts leaned among the trees. Most were covered in moss. Some had fallen completely. The farther he walked, the more forgotten everything became. Then he saw the roof. At first, he thought it was another rock formation, a dark shape hidden among the pines. Then sunlight caught a broken window. Glass flashed. Noah stopped. A cabin sat ahead, small, weathered, silent. The forest seemed to bend around it. He approached slowly. The building looked older than anything else he had seen in Black Pine. A rusted chimney rose above the roof. One shutter hung crookedly. Several porch boards had collapsed. Yet, despite decades of neglect, the structure still stood. That alone impressed him. A faded sign hung beside the front door. Most of the lettering had disappeared. Only a few words remain. Ranger Station. The rest had been erased by time. Noah stepped onto the porch. The wood creaked beneath his weight. One more step. Another creak. A squirrel exploded from beneath the structure and nearly gave him a heart attack. He laughed despite himself, the first genuine laugh in days. Inside, the cabin smelled like dust, pine sap, and old wood. Sunlight entered through cracks in the walls. A rusted stove sat near the center of the room. A table leaned against one wall. Shelves stood empty. Everything felt frozen, as though someone had left one day and never returned. Noah spent nearly an hour exploring. No signs of recent visitors, no graffiti, no trash, no evidence of campers. Strangely, that made the place feel even more unsettling. It wasn't abandoned recently. It had been abandoned for decades. Near sunset, he returned to the creek and considered his options. The cabin had problems, lots of them. The roof leaked. The windows were broken. The door barely closed, but it was shelter. Real shelter. For the first time since being thrown out, he could imagine surviving the next storm. That evening, he returned to town to buy supplies. A loaf of bread, peanut butter, a flashlight, nothing more. While leaving the small general store, he overheard two older men talking near the entrance. One mentioned the ranger cabin. Noah immediately slowed down. The place should have been torn down years ago. Probably. You remember what happened there? The second man nodded. Hard to forget. Noah's attention sharpened. What happened? He asked. Both men looked at him. For a moment, neither answered. Then the older one spoke. The ranger disappeared. When? Long time ago. How long? 1982. Noah waited. The man scratched his chin. Never found a body. A cold feeling settled into Noah's stomach. The second man added quietly, "Some folks say he walked away." "And others?" Noah asked. The men exchanged a glance. Neither seemed eager to continue. Finally, the first man shrugged. "Others say the forest kept him." That night, lying beneath the stars, Noah couldn't stop thinking about the cabin. A missing ranger, an abandoned station, 40 years of silence. Most people would have avoided the place. Most people had somewhere else to go. Noah didn't. The next morning, he packed his things before sunrise. By noon, he was standing in front of the cabin again. The forest was silent. A breeze moved through the pines. Somewhere high above, a hawk cried out. Noah placed his hand on the weathered door. He looked at the dark interior beyond it, then at the endless forest surrounding him. For the first time in days, he felt something that wasn't fear, possibility. "Guess it's just you and me," he said softly. The cabin said nothing back, but somehow it felt like the beginning of something. And neither Noah nor the forgotten ranger who once lived there could have imagined what was waiting beneath the floor. By the fourth morning, Noah Carter had started talking to the cabin. Not full conversations, just small comments. The kind people made when nobody else was around. "That board wasn't loose yesterday." Or, "One more rainstorm and this roof is going to kill me." The strange thing was that the cabin almost felt like it was listening. Every day he discovered something new. A hidden shelf, an old nail driven into a beam, a faded ranger marking carved into a doorway. The place was slowly revealing itself, one small secret at a time. Noah spent most of the morning repairing the broken front steps. The work wasn't pretty. A professional carpenter would probably laugh at it. But the steps no longer threatened to collapse beneath him, and that felt like a victory. Around noon, he walked to the creek carrying an empty coffee can. Fishing had become easier. Hunger was a good teacher. 3 weeks ago, he couldn't have caught a fish to save his life. Now he knew where the trout hid beneath the rocks and how the water changed after rain. As he crouched beside the creek, he noticed movement across the bank. A dog stood among the trees. Noah froze. The animal looked familiar. Yellow fur, one torn ear, thin body. The same stray dog from the trailer park. "No way," Noah whispered. The dog stared at him. Neither moved. For several seconds, they simply watched each other. Then the dog disappeared back into the woods. Noah stood and hurried across the creek, but by the time he reached the other side, the animal was gone. No tracks, no sound, nothing. The encounter stayed with him the entire walk back to the cabin. Black Pine Forest was huge, miles and miles of wilderness. What were the chances that the same dog had somehow ended up here? Small, very small. Yet Noah couldn't shake the feeling he had truly seen it. Back at the cabin, he cooked 2 trout over the stove and continued working on the interior walls. Most of the ranger station's furniture had vanished long ago. Only scraps remained: broken shelves, rusted hinges, a warped cabinet hanging crookedly near the back room. Noah pushed against the cabinet while cleaning. Something rattled inside the wall. He stopped immediately. The sound had been faint, almost too faint to notice. He pushed again. Rattle. Noah frowned. The cabinet itself was empty. Whatever had made the noise wasn't inside it. It was behind it. Curiosity immediately replaced common sense. He grabbed a screwdriver and removed the cabinet from the wall. Dust exploded everywhere. Noah coughed and waved his hand in front of his face. Behind the cabinet, he discovered a narrow wooden panel. Unlike the surrounding wall, the panel had no paint, no weathering, no visible nails. It looked as though someone had intentionally hidden it. His pulse quickened. Slowly, he pried it loose. A folded piece of paper slipped out and landed on the floor. For a moment, Noah simply stared. Then he picked it up. The paper was brittle with age. Carefully, he unfolded it. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a journal page. It was a map. Noah spread it across the table. Lines crisscrossed the paper. Trails, streams, elevation markings. At the top, someone had written Black Pine District in faded pencil. Several sections had been circled in red. Most meant nothing to him, but one detail immediately caught his attention. Near the center of the map, exactly where the ranger cabin stood, someone had drawn a small black symbol, a square with an X through it. Noah studied it. Every other marking on the map had a label. This one didn't. Just the symbol. Nothing else. He turned the paper over. Blank. He checked every corner. No explanation, no legend, no notes, just the strange mark beneath the cabin. That evening, the mystery became even stranger. While searching for more clues, Noah noticed initials carved into one of the ceiling beams above the stove. J.C. The letters were old, deeply cut, not random scratches. Someone had intentionally carved them there decades ago. Noah stared at them for a long time. J.C. The initials felt familiar. Then realization hit him. Jacob Carter, his grandfather, the grandfather nobody talked about, the grandfather who seemed to exist only in a single photograph hidden among his mother's belongings. Noah barely remembered the picture. A tall man standing beside a forest truck, ranger uniform, dark beard, serious eyes. Every time Noah had asked about him, his mother changed the subject. Every single time. "What happened to Grandpa Jacob?" Noah had once asked when he was 11. His mother's expression had immediately tightened. "It's complicated. Is he dead? I don't know." That answer had confused Noah for years. How could someone not know? Looking at the initials now, the memory returned with surprising clarity. J.C. Jacob Carter. Coincidence, maybe. Yet something felt wrong. Or perhaps right. The deeper Noah looked, the more connections appeared. The Carter name, the ranger station, the forest, the silence surrounding his grandfather. Suddenly, none of it seemed random anymore. Night settled over Black Pine. Rain began tapping softly against the roof. Noah sat beside the stove with the map spread across his knees. He traced the symbol again. Square X, directly beneath the cabin. What was someone trying to mark? Storage A. Well, an old foundation he didn't know. But for the first time since discovering the ranger station, the cabin felt less abandoned. It felt watched. Not by ghosts, not by anything supernatural. By history. By people who had once lived here and left pieces of themselves behind. Before going to sleep, Noah folded the map and slid it into his backpack. Then he glanced one final time at the initials carved into the beam above him. J.C. The fire crackled softly. Wind brushed against the walls. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the cabin, a dog barked once. Noah sat upright. The sound lasted only a second. Then silence returned. He waited several minutes. Nothing. Eventually, he lay back down, but sleep came slowly that night, because one question kept returning. If Jacob Carter had really been here, why had nobody ever told him? And why did a forgotten map seem to suggest that something important was hidden directly beneath the cabin? The next morning, Noah woke up thinking about the map. Not breakfast, not fishing, not firewood. The map. More specifically, the strange symbol directly beneath the ranger cabin. He had spent half the night staring at it by flashlight. A square, an X. No explanation, no label, no reason. Just a mark placed exactly where he was sleeping. The more he thought about it, the less it felt accidental. After eating a cold piece of bread and refilling his water from the creek, he spread the map across the table again. Morning sunlight poured through the broken window beside him. Dust floated through the air like tiny insects. Noah traced the symbol with his finger. Then he looked around the room. If someone had wanted to hide something beneath the cabin, where would they put it? His eyes moved from wall to wall. The stove sat near the center of the room. Heavy cast iron, probably older than he was. Maybe older than his mother. Nearby stood a table, 2 shelves, a storage cabinet. Nothing unusual. Yet something continued bothering him. He couldn't explain why. The feeling stayed with him throughout the morning as he worked on the roof. Around noon, a storm rolled across Black Pine. Dark clouds swallowed the sky. Rain hammered the cabin. Noah retreated inside and watched water drip from several leaks he hadn't fixed yet. One drip landed beside the stove, another near the wall, a third directly in front of the table. He grabbed an old bucket and moved it beneath the leak. As he stepped across the floor, a board shifted beneath his foot. Noah stopped. He stepped backward, then forward again. Creak. Not unusual. The entire cabin creaked. But this sound felt different. Hollow somehow. He crouched and pressed against the board with both hands. It moved slightly. Just enough to notice. Noah frowned. The floor around it felt solid. This section didn't. He knocked gently on the wood. Funk. Then another section. Funk. Then the suspicious board. Clunk. A deeper sound. Different. He knocked again. Clunk. For several seconds, he simply stared. Then he laughed at himself. Maybe the floor was rotten. Maybe that was all. Old cabins had rotten floors, not hidden treasure, not secret rooms, rotten wood. Yet he couldn't leave it alone. The next hour disappeared. Noah removed furniture from the area. The table, the chair, several loose boards stacked against the wall. Eventually, only the stove remained. Unfortunately, the stove sat partially over the suspicious section. "Of course you do," Noah muttered. Moving it wasn't easy. The thing weighed a small fortune. After nearly 20 minutes of pushing, grunting, and questioning his life choices, the stove shifted a few inches, then a few more. Sweat soaked through his shirt despite the cold rain outside. Finally, the stove slid clear. Noah froze. Something metal reflected light beneath the dust. His heartbeat immediately accelerated. He dropped to one knee and brushed away years of dirt. More metal appeared. Then a rusted ring. Then an outline. Noah's pulse pounded inside his ears. No way. Slowly, he cleared more dust. The shape became obvious. A square iron hatch built directly into the floor. For several seconds, he simply stared. The hatch looked ancient. Rust covered most of its surface. Dirt filled the edges. Whatever lay beneath hadn't been opened in years, maybe decades. The symbol on the map flashed through his mind. Square. X. Beneath the cabin. Suddenly, it made sense. Noah grabbed the iron ring and pulled. Nothing happened. He pulled harder. Still nothing. The hatch didn't move even slightly. Rust had practically welded it shut. He tried again. Nothing. Great. He sat back against the wall. The excitement faded quickly. Discovering a hidden hatch was one thing. Opening it was another. Rain continued pounding the roof. The cabin seemed unusually quiet now, as though it were waiting. Noah spent the remainder of the afternoon attacking the hatch. He cleaned dirt from the edges, pried with a screwdriver, hammered gently around the frame. Every effort produced the same result. Nothing. By sunset, his arms ached, his hands hurt. The hatch remained closed. That night, he barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined what might be below. Storage room, supplies, old records. Nothing. Everything. The possibilities seemed endless. The next morning, he hiked nearly 5 miles to a hardware store outside town. The trip consumed most of the day and nearly all of his remaining money. But he returned carrying penetrating oil, a small pry bar, and enough determination to frighten reasonable people. He immediately got to work. Oil, wait, pry, pull, repeat. Again, again, again. Hours passed. The sun drifted lower. Then, just as Noah considered giving up, a sharp metallic crack echoed through the cabin. He froze. The hatch had moved. Only a fraction of an inch, but it had moved. Excitement surged through him. He wedged the pry bar deeper and pulled harder. Another crack. More movement. Rust broke free. Dust drifted upward. Something below released a stale breath of air that hadn't seen daylight in decades. Noah stepped back instinctively. The smell was old. Not rotten. Not dangerous. Just ancient. His heart pounded harder than ever. One final pull. The hatch lifted. Slowly. Reluctantly. A rectangle of darkness opened beneath the floor. Noah grabbed his flashlight. For several seconds, he stood completely still. Every horror movie he had ever seen suddenly felt relevant. Finally, curiosity won. It always did. He aimed the flashlight downward. Wooden steps disappeared into darkness. Not a hole, not a crawl space. Stairs. Actual stairs. Leading somewhere below the cabin. Noah swallowed hard. "Well," he whispered to nobody, "that's definitely not normal." The beam of light traveled deeper. Dust floated through the darkness. The staircase turned slightly and vanished from view. Whatever waited below remained hidden. But one thing was certain. Somebody had built this place intentionally. Somebody had wanted it concealed. And somebody had gone to great lengths to make sure nobody found it. Noah stood at the top of the stairs for a long time, listening, waiting, thinking. Then he tightened his grip on the flashlight and took the first step downward. The stairs groaned beneath Noah's weight. The sound seemed impossibly loud inside the darkness below the cabin. He paused after the third step and listened. Nothing moved. Nothing answered. The only sound came from his own breathing and the faint rain tapping against the roof far above. The flashlight beam shook slightly in his hand, not because he was cold, because he suddenly understood something important. Whatever waited below had remained hidden for decades. He was probably the first person to stand on these stairs in 40 years. The thought sent a strange chill through him. Noah continued downward. One step, then another. Dust floated through the flashlight beam. The air smelled dry and stale, like old paper and forgotten places. At the bottom of the staircase, the room opened before him. It wasn't large, maybe 20 feet long, 15 feet wide, smaller than he expected. Yet it felt important somehow. Shelves lined the walls. Wooden crates sat stacked in one corner. A workbench occupied the far side of the room. Everything was covered by a thick layer of dust. Noah slowly turned in a circle. Whoever built this place hadn't intended it as a shelter. This was storage. Organized storage. Purposeful storage. The shelves immediately caught his attention. Rows of binders sat there, dozens of them. Some had collapsed with age, others remained upright. Noah approached carefully and pulled one free. A cloud of dust exploded into the air. He coughed and wiped his eyes. The binder cover read, Black Pine District Patrol Logs, 1979. Noah frowned. Patrol logs? He opened the cover. Inside were handwritten reports, dates, locations, wildlife sightings, trail inspections, ranger notes. Real records, not random papers. Someone had preserved years of information down here. He flipped through several pages before noticing a signature at the bottom. J. Carter. Noah froze. He looked again. J. Carter. The same initials from the beam above the stove, his grandfather. Suddenly the room felt smaller. Noah pulled another binder from the shelf, then another. Every one contained similar records. Trail maintenance, forest surveys, wildlife reports. At first, the entries seemed ordinary. Then he found something unusual. A report from August 1981. The handwriting looked rushed. Several sentences had been crossed out. One paragraph remained. Noah read it twice. Unauthorized activity observed near eastern boundary. Returning tomorrow for documentation. Further investigation required. The rest of the page had been blacked out with thick marker. Noah stared at it. Why would a ranger censor his own report? He continued searching. More patrol logs, more reports. More signatures from Jay Carter. Hours seemed to pass without him noticing. The deeper he dug, the more he felt as though he were meeting someone he had never known. Jacob Carter wasn't becoming less mysterious. He was becoming more real. Noah began noticing small things. Certain words appeared repeatedly. Responsible, thorough, careful. His grandfather documented everything: weather conditions, animal tracks, visitor complaints, broken signs, missing fences, tiny details most people would ignore. It reminded Noah of something his father used to say: if you pay attention to small things, big things stop surprising you. The memory hit unexpectedly. For a moment, Noah simply stood there holding an old binder. He hadn't thought about his father in days, not properly. Survival had consumed too much space inside his mind. Yet now, surrounded by evidence of another forgotten family member, the loss returned. Noah set the binder down and continued exploring. The workbench contained tools, old measuring instruments, survey equipment, several rusted lanterns. One drawer held dozens of pencils sharpened to identical lengths. Another contained carefully folded maps. Everything suggested the same thing. Jacob Carter had been organized, extremely organized, which made what Noah found next even stranger. Beneath the workbench sat a cardboard file box. Unlike everything else, the box appeared hurriedly packed. Papers stuck out at odd angles. Several folders remained half open. Noah pulled it closer. On top rested a photograph. He picked it up. 5 people stood in front of a Forest Service truck. 4 wore ranger uniforms. One of them was Jacob Carter. Noah recognized him immediately from the old family picture. Younger, stronger, smiling. Noah stared at the image longer than necessary. He had never seen his grandfather smile before. Then he noticed something written on the back: "Keep hidden." The words had been written in dark ink, large letters, urgent letters. Noah's heartbeat quickened. Hidden from who? Hidden why? He immediately searched the rest of the box. More photographs, more documents, newspaper clippings. Most seemed harmless at first glance, yet nearly every item carried handwritten notes, circles, arrows, questions. It looked less like a ranger's archive and more like an investigation. Noah sat on the floor and continued sorting. As darkness gathered outside, a pattern slowly emerged. The final months of Jacob Carter's records were different. Earlier documents focused on forest work. Later documents focused on people. Landowners, surveyors, county officials. Names appeared repeatedly. One name more than any other: Harold Grayson. Noah had never heard it before, yet the name surfaced again and again, written in margins, underlined on reports, circled on maps. Eventually, Noah discovered a journal hidden beneath the photographs. Unlike the official records, this one was personal. The leather cover had cracked with age. The first page simply read, "Jacob Carter, 1981. Noah settled against the wall and began reading. The entries started normally. Weather reports, trail conditions, daily ranger duties. Then the tone changed. Small concerns appeared, strange observations, questions. The deeper Noah read, the more troubled the entries became. Something was happening in Black Pine during 1981 and 1982. Something Jacob Carter believed was serious. Unfortunately, the journal never explained exactly what. Not yet. Instead, every answer seemed to create 2 new questions. Midnight arrived before Noah noticed. He finally forced himself to stop reading. His flashlight battery had weakened, his eyes hurt, his stomach ground. Yet he couldn't bring himself to leave. He felt closer to his grandfather than ever before, closer than he had felt to anyone in years. Before climbing the stairs, Noah opened the journal one last time. Near the back, he found one of the final entries. The handwriting looked noticeably different, less controlled, more rushed. He read the words slowly. "They know what I found." Noah frowned. He turned the page. Blank. He turned another page. Blank. Then he reached the end. The remaining pages had been torn out, every single one. The final explanation was gone. The final discovery was gone. The final truth had been removed. Noah sat frozen in the silence, because for the first time since finding the cabin, he was absolutely certain of something. Jacob Carter hadn't hidden this cellar to protect old Ranger records. He had hidden it because someone wanted them destroyed. And somewhere among the missing pages was the reason a respected ranger vanished from Black Pine Forest and was never seen again. The missing pages bothered Noah more than he wanted to admit. For 3 days, he couldn't stop thinking about them. Every time he opened Jacob Carter's journal, he eventually found himself flipping to the torn section near the back. Every time he stared at the jagged edges where the pages had once been, every time he imagined what those missing words might have revealed, someone had removed them intentionally. Not one page, not two, an entire section. Whoever had done it wanted the ending erased. That thought followed him everywhere. It followed him while he repaired the cabin roof. It followed him while he checked fishing lines in the creek. It followed him while he sat beside the stove at night, listening to the forest settle into darkness. The cellar had changed everything. Before discovering it, the cabin had been a shelter. Now it felt like a puzzle. Every answer led to another question. Every clue pointed towards something bigger. The strange part was that Noah no longer felt completely alone. He still had nobody to talk to. Nobody knew where he lived. Nobody knew what he had found. Yet each time he opened one of Jacob Carter's journals, it felt as though someone was speaking directly to him across 40 years. One afternoon, Noah returned from the creek carrying 2 trout and found the yellow dog sitting on the porch. He stopped immediately. The animal looked exactly the same as before. Torn ear, thin frame, golden fur darkened by dirt. The dog watched him calmly. Not scared, not aggressive, just watching. "You again," Noah said. The dog tilted its head. Noah set down the fish. "You know this is getting weird, right?" The dog remained silent. Noah approached slowly. This time the animal didn't run. It simply sat there, waiting. Noah crouched and held out part of one trout. After several seconds, the dog carefully stepped forward and took it, then retreated 3 feet and ate. Noah smiled despite himself. "Guess we're both homeless." The dog finished the fish and stared at him again. Something about the animal felt familiar, not because Noah recognized it, because it seemed to recognize him. Before Noah could move closer, the dog suddenly turned toward the forest, its ears lifted. It became alert. Then it disappeared between the trees, gone within seconds. Noah stood alone on the porch. "Okay," he muttered. "That's normal." But he knew it wasn't. That evening he returned to the cellar. The journals had occupied most of his attention until now. He realized he had barely explored the rest of the room. Several crates remained unopened. Metal filing cabinets stood untouched against one wall. The workbench still contained dozens of drawers. If Jacob Carter had hidden important records here, there was no reason to believe everything would be inside a single journal. Noah started with the filing cabinets. Most drawers contained ordinary ranger paperwork, wildlife surveys, maintenance reports, weather logs. Interesting, but not revealing. Then he found something different, a folder marked Land Use Records. Noah sat down and opened it. Inside were maps, property lines, survey notes, boundary changes. At first, he understood very little. The documents were technical and full of legal descriptions. Yet one detail quickly stood out. The same areas appeared repeatedly. The eastern boundary of Black Pine, the exact region mentioned in Jacob Carter's final reports. Noah spread several maps across the floor. Some were decades old, others looked newer. The property lines didn't match. Entire sections had changed ownership. Roads appeared where none existed before. Boundaries shifted. Names disappeared. New names appeared. Noah frowned. Something wasn't right. He spent hours comparing maps. Eventually, he noticed another familiar name. Harold Grayson, the same man who appeared repeatedly in the journals. This time, the name appeared on property records, survey documents, purchase agreements. The deeper Noah looked, the more often Harold Grayson appeared. It was impossible to ignore. Then he discovered a locked metal box. The box sat beneath a stack of maps inside the lowest cabinet drawer. Small, heavy, covered in dust. Noah carried it to the workbench. The lock had rusted badly. Fortunately, the metal wasn't particularly strong. 20 minutes later, the lock surrendered. Inside sat several bundles of papers tied together with faded string. Noah carefully untied the first bundle. His pulse quickened almost immediately. These weren't ranger records. They were deeds, property deeds. Some dated back more than 50 years. Others included handwritten notes from Jacob Carter. One document contained a sentence heavily underlined in red pencil. Original ownership disputed. Verify survey. Another contained a note written in the margin. Family removed after boundary change. Noah read it twice. Family removed. Removed from what? As darkness settled outside, Noah continued sorting through the documents. Piece by piece, a picture began forming. Not a complete picture, just enough to make him uncomfortable. Entire families appeared to have lost land after a series of revised surveys. Ownership transferred. Boundaries changed. Records altered. Noah wasn't an expert. He couldn't prove anything. Yet even he could see a pattern. One deed stopped him cold. He almost missed it. The paper had slipped between two larger files. The surname caught his eye. Carter. Noah stared, then looked again. Carter. The document listed a parcel of land bordering Black Pine National Forest. Original owner, Samuel Carter. Noah's great-grandfather. Noah's mouth went dry. He read every line, then read it again. The land had once belonged to his family, not the cabin, something much larger. Hundreds of acres, forest land. The ownership history became confusing after that. Boundary disputes, survey corrections, legal transfers. The trail eventually disappeared into names Noah didn't recognize. But one thing was clear. His family had once owned part of this region. Nobody had ever mentioned it. Not his mother, not his father. Nobody. Noah leaned back against the wall. Suddenly, the mystery wasn't just about Jacob Carter anymore. It was about him, about his family, about secrets that had somehow survived across generations. The realization unsettled him. For years, Noah had believed the Carters were ordinary people, poor, forgettable, unimportant. Yet here he sat beneath an abandoned ranger cabin, holding evidence that suggested otherwise. He looked around the cellar, the shelves, the records, the maps, the journals. Jacob Carter hadn't hidden this place because he loved paperwork. He had hidden it because he was preserving evidence. Evidence of what? Noah still didn't fully understand, but evidence nonetheless. A floorboard creaked above him. Noah immediately froze. The sound came from inside the cabin, directly overhead. For several seconds he didn't move. Another creak followed. Then silence. His flashlight beam swept across the cellar. Nothing. The room remained empty. Slowly, Noah stood. Maybe the cabin was settling. Old wood made noises all the time, he knew that. Yet a strange feeling settled into his stomach. He climbed halfway up the stairs and listened. Silence. Then, faintly, a sound reached him. Not from the cabin, from outside. A vehicle engine, far away but close enough to hear. Noah extinguished the flashlight instantly. His heart pounded. Nobody should be here. Nobody came this deep into Black Pine. He climbed the remaining stairs carefully and peered through a crack beside the boarded window. A dark pickup truck sat near the trail, not close to the cabin, but closer than any vehicle had been since he arrived. Two men stood beside it. One pointed toward the forest. The other studied something in his hands. A map, perhaps. Noah couldn't tell. They remained there several minutes, then climbed back into the truck and drove away. Noah waited another 10 minutes before moving. When he finally returned to the cellar, the room felt different. More dangerous somehow, because for the first time, a possibility occurred to him. What if he wasn't the only person searching for whatever Jacob Carter had hidden? And what if the missing journal pages weren't the only thing somebody wanted to find? The truck stayed in Noah's thoughts long after it disappeared down the forest road. He tried convincing himself it meant nothing. Hunters used the trails. Survey crews occasionally entered the forest. Utility workers sometimes checked remote equipment. There were plenty of reasons for people to be near Black Pine. Yet none of those explanations felt right. The men hadn't looked lost. They hadn't looked curious. They had looked like they were searching for something. More importantly, they had stopped near a trail almost nobody used, the trail that led to the ranger cabin. The following morning, Noah woke before sunrise. The forest remained dark and silent. For several minutes, he listened from his cot. Nothing unusual. No engines, no voices, no footsteps. Still, he found himself checking the window before stepping outside. It was a strange feeling. Only a week ago he had worried about finding shelter. Now he worried someone might find him. The yellow dog appeared shortly after dawn. Noah nearly laughed when he spotted it sitting beside the creek. "You really do live here, don't you?" The dog looked up, but didn't move. Noah tossed it part of a fish. The animal caught it easily. Then, instead of running away, it followed him back toward the cabin. Not close, just close enough to watch. The arrangement suited Noah. Neither seemed interested in admitting they enjoyed the company. Throughout the morning, he worked on the roof. Every few minutes, he caught himself scanning the trees. Once he thought he saw movement among the pines. Another time, he was certain he heard a vehicle in the distance. Each time, it turned out to be nothing. By noon, he was annoyed with himself. "You're getting paranoid," he muttered. Unfortunately, the words failed to convince him. That afternoon, he decided to visit Earl Benson. If anyone knew something about the cabin, it would be Earl. The old fisherman sat beside the same pond as usual. Same chair, same faded hat, same tackle box. Noah was beginning to suspect Earl never actually left. "You look tired," Earl said without looking up from his fishing line. "Thanks." Not a compliment. Noah sat beside him. For a few minutes, neither spoke. Earl seemed perfectly comfortable with silence. Eventually, Noah mentioned the cabin. The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. "Still staying there?" "Yeah." "Then you're stubborn." "I've been called worse." Earl chuckled. "Fair enough." Noah hesitated before mentioning the truck. The moment he described the men, Earl's expression changed, just slightly. But Noah noticed. "You know them?" Noah asked. "Maybe." "That's not an answer," Earl sighed. "Sometimes the smartest thing in life is learning which questions not to ask. And sometimes that's exactly how people get lied to." The old fisherman studied him for a long moment. "You sound like Jacob." Noah froze. Earl immediately realized what he had said. The old man set down his fishing pole. "You knew him?" Noah asked quietly. Earl nodded once. "A little." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wasn't sure." "Sure of what?" "Whether you were ready to hear about him." Noah leaned forward. "Then tell me now." Earl stared across the pond. For several seconds he seemed lost in a memory. "Jacob Carter was one of the few honest men I've ever met." Noah said nothing. Earl continued. "Which sounds like a compliment until you realize honest men tend to make powerful enemies." The statement lingered between them. "What happened to him?" Noah asked. Earl's jaw tightened. "Depends who you ask." "I'm asking you." "Then my answer is simple. He found something somebody didn't want found." Noah's heartbeat quickened. "What?" "That," Earl said, "is the question everybody forgot to ask." Before Noah could press further, Earl stood. Conversation over, at least for now. The old fisherman gathered his gear and headed toward his truck. "Be careful around that cabin, son." "Why?" Earl looked directly at him. "Because some people spent 40 years pretending certain things never happened. Folks like that don't usually appreciate reminders." The warning stayed with Noah during the hike home. By the time he reached the cabin, the forest felt different. Not dangerous exactly, watchful. As evening approached, he returned to the cellar and continued sorting documents. The deeper he searched, the more evidence he uncovered. Land records, survey reports, property transfers. Some looked ordinary. Others definitely did not. Several contained handwritten notes from Jacob Carter questioning official boundary changes. One document accused a private surveying company of altering measurements. Another suggested entire parcels of land had changed ownership without proper notification. Noah understood only half of what he read. Yet even half was enough to reveal a pattern. Someone had been stealing land. The realization made him uneasy, not because of the crime itself, because crimes left victims. Victims left enemies, and enemies sometimes returned. Darkness settled outside. Noah climbed from the cellar and prepared dinner. A small fire crackled inside the stove. Rain tapped softly against the roof. For the first time all day, he relaxed. Then he noticed the front door. It stood open 2 inches. Noah froze. He was absolutely certain he had closed it. Slowly, he set down his plate. The cabin felt suddenly silent. Too silent. His eyes scanned the room. Nothing appeared disturbed. Yet something felt wrong. Very wrong. He moved carefully toward the door. The lock showed no damage. The hinges looked normal, but muddy footprints marked the floor near the entrance. Fresh footprints. Noah's pulse exploded. Someone had been inside. Not days ago. Not yesterday. Recently. He grabbed the flashlight and searched the cabin. Every corner, every shelf, every room. Nothing seemed stolen. The backpack remained hidden beneath his cot. His supplies remained untouched. Even the money inside his pack was still there. Confusion replaced fear. If someone entered the cabin, why take nothing? Then Noah remembered the cellar. He practically ran across the room. The trapdoor remained hidden beneath the stove, exactly where he left it. Yet when he descended into the cellar, he immediately noticed a change. One drawer on the workbench stood partially open. Noah stared. He had closed every drawer before leaving. Every single one. Somebody had searched the cellar. Not thoroughly, not successfully, but enough to prove they knew it existed. Noah stood in the darkness, listening to his own breathing. Suddenly, the mystery felt much larger than missing journal pages or forgotten land records. Someone else was looking. Someone alive, someone close, someone who knew enough to search the cabin, but not enough to find what they wanted. The realization terrified him. It also raised a far more dangerous question. If they came once and left empty-handed, when would they come back? For the next 3 nights, Noah slept with the pocket knife beneath his pillow. It wasn't much of a weapon, he knew that. The blade was barely 4 inches long and slightly loose near the hinge. But it had belonged to his father, and right now that mattered more than practicality. Every creak in the cabin sounded different after discovering someone had searched the cellar. Every gust of wind felt suspicious. Every shadow outside the windows seemed to linger a little too long. The strange thing was that whoever entered hadn't taken anything. They hadn't stolen food. They hadn't touched his backpack. They hadn't even found the hidden box of documents Noah had moved beneath a loose floorboard. It was as if they had come looking for one specific thing and left disappointed. That thought frightened him more than simple theft would have. On the 4th morning, Noah made a decision. He needed answers from someone who knew more than Earl Benson was willing to share. The problem was that very few people still remembered the ranger who vanished in 1982. Most had either moved away or died. The few who remained treated the subject like an old wound nobody wanted reopened. Still, Noah had one lead. While sorting through Jacob Carter's records, he had found a photograph he hadn't paid much attention to at first. 4 rangers standing beside a truck. Jacob was one of them. On the back, several names had been written in fading ink. 3 names meant nothing to him. The 4th did. Eleanor Brooks. Noah had heard it before. 2 days earlier, while buying supplies in town, he had seen the name on a mailbox outside a small white house near the edge of Ash Creek. The memory returned immediately. Eleanor Brooks. He spent the morning hiking into town. The journey felt longer than usual. His mind remained occupied with questions. By the time he reached the mailbox, clouds had gathered over the mountains. The house itself looked ordinary. Small front porch, flower garden, wind chimes hanging near the door. Nothing suggested mystery. Nothing suggested secrets. Noah almost turned around twice before finally knocking. The woman who opened the door looked older than he expected, mid-70s perhaps. White hair pulled into a loose braid, sharp blue eyes, the kind of eyes that noticed everything. She studied Noah for several seconds. Can I help you? Noah suddenly forgot the speech he had prepared. Are you Eleanor Brooks? Depends who's asking. Noah held up the photograph. The effect was immediate. Eleanor's expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Recognition, surprise, then caution. Where did you get that? She asked quietly. Noah hesitated. From the ranger cabin. The silence that followed felt heavy. Eleanor looked past him toward the road, then back at the photograph. Finally, she stepped aside. You'd better come inside. 20 minutes later, they sat at her kitchen table drinking tea. Noah wrapped both hands around the warm mug. Eleanor studied him carefully. You have his eyes, she said. Whose? Jacob's. Noah swallowed. Hearing someone speak his grandfather's name felt strangely personal. You really knew him? Eleanor smiled sadly. For 12 years. Noah leaned forward. What was he like? The answer came immediately. Stubborn? Noah laughed. Eleanor laughed, too. Very stubborn. For the first time since arriving, some of the tension left the room. She reached for the photograph. Her fingers lingered on Jacob's image. Most people remember him as a ranger. That wasn't the important part. What was? Eleanor looked directly at him. He cared. Noah frowned. Lots of people care. Not like Jacob. She pointed toward the window. See that house across the road? Noah nodded. Jacob helped build it after a wildfire destroyed the original. Never accepted $1. She pointed elsewhere. The Henderson farm, same story. The church roof, same story. The school trail, same story. Eleanor smiled faintly. Your grandfather couldn't walk past a problem without trying to fix it. Noah found himself smiling. The description felt familiar somehow, like hearing stories about a relative he should have known. Then Eleanor's smile faded. That's also what got him into trouble. The room grew quiet. Noah waited. Eleanor stared at the photograph. People say Jacob disappeared. Didn't he? Physically, yes. Her eyes hardened. But that's not the whole story. Noah felt his heartbeat quicken. What happened? Eleanor stood and crossed the room. For several moments, she searched through an old wooden cabinet. When she returned, she carried a worn envelope. Carefully, she placed it on the table. Before I answer that, I want you to see something. Noah opened the envelope. Inside were newspaper clippings, photographs, letters. One photograph immediately caught his attention. Jacob Carter, shaking hands with local families beside newly marked property lines. Another showed him standing in front of a survey marker deep in the forest. A third displayed several county officials gathered around maps. One face appeared repeatedly. Harold Grayson. Noah recognized the name instantly. Him, Noah said. Eleanor nodded. I wondered when you'd notice. Who was he? Back then, county commissioner. And, Eleanor sighed, a man who wanted things. What things? Land. Noah immediately thought about the deeds hidden in the cellar, the altered surveys, the disputed boundaries. Suddenly the pieces felt closer together. Not complete, but closer. Eleanor folded her hands. Jacob discovered something involving property records near Black Pine. The land transfers, Noah asked. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly. You've seen them? Noah immediately regretted speaking. Yet it was too late. Eleanor studied him for several seconds before nodding. Then you've already found more than most people ever did. The old woman looked toward the window. Rain had begun falling outside. Soft, steady, almost peaceful. Your grandfather spent months collecting evidence, she said quietly. He believed land had been taken from families through fraudulent surveys. Noah felt a chill run through him. Did he prove it? Almost. The word landed heavily. Almost. Not completely. Not successfully. Almost. Noah suddenly understood why that answer mattered. Because people don't vanish after proving something. They vanish while trying. Eleanor opened another drawer and removed a small notebook. The cover looked familiar. Ranger issue. Similar to the journals Noah had already found. Jacob gave this to me 2 weeks before he disappeared. Noah carefully accepted it. Why? Eleanor's voice softened. Because he thought something might happen. Silence filled the kitchen. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, Noah looked up. Did it? Eleanor met his gaze. Yes. The answer was simple, honest, terrifying. Noah opened the notebook. Most pages contained ordinary notes. Then he reached the back. Several pages had been folded together. A message had been written there. Not to Eleanor, not to anyone specific. Just a sentence. If anything happens to me, the truth is still in Black Pine. Noah stared at the words. His grandfather had known. Somehow he had known. Not exactly what would happen, perhaps, but enough to prepare, enough to leave clues, enough to hide evidence, enough to build a secret cellar beneath a forgotten ranger cabin. Noah slowly closed the notebook. The room suddenly felt very small, because for the first time, the mystery was no longer about a missing ranger. It was about a man who had knowingly stepped into danger because he believed the truth mattered more than his own safety. Eleanor watched him carefully. There's something else you should know. Noah looked up. What? The old woman's eyes softened. Your grandfather spent years searching for your father after the family left Black Pine. Noah froze. What? He never stopped looking. The words struck harder than anything else she'd said. All his life, Noah had quietly believed that Jacob Carter had abandoned the family. Everyone seemed to act as though he had. Yet Eleanor was telling a completely different story. He cared about you, she said softly. Even before you were born. Noah looked away. Emotion tightened unexpectedly in his chest. He wasn't prepared for that. Land records, corruption, missing evidence, those things were easier, simpler. This wasn't. For years he had felt disconnected from the Carter name. Now, sitting in a quiet kitchen while rain fell outside, he discovered that someone had spent years trying to hold the family together. Someone he had never even met. When Noah finally left Eleanor's house, evening had arrived. The notebook rested safely inside his backpack. The rain had stopped. Clouds drifted across the mountains. As he started toward Black Pine, one thought remained fixed inside his mind. Jacob Carter hadn't hidden evidence because he wanted revenge. He had hidden it because he wanted the truth to survive. And somewhere inside the forest, hidden among the records and missing pages, the final piece of that truth was still waiting to be found. Noah reached the cabin long after dark. The notebook Eleanor had given him never left his hands during the walk back through Black Pine. Twice he stopped beside the trail and reread the final sentence. The truth is still in Black Pine. Each time the words seemed heavier, more deliberate. Jacob Carter hadn't written them casually. He had written them because he believed someone would eventually come looking. The strange part was that Noah no longer felt like a kid hiding in an abandoned cabin. Somewhere between the cellar, the journals, and Eleanor's stories, he had become part of something much larger. The realization should have frightened him. Instead, it made him feel responsible. The cabin greeted him with familiar silence. The stove still held enough heat from the morning fire to warm the room. His backpack landed beside the table. The notebook joined the growing stack of records spread across the floor. For several minutes, Noah simply stood there looking at everything. Maps, deeds, photographs, patrol logs, journals. It felt less like a cabin and more like an investigation headquarters abandoned by time. Eventually, he opened the notebook again. This time, he read every page carefully, not quickly, not searching for obvious clues. Slowly, the way Jacob Carter would have wanted. Most entries seemed ordinary. Notes about weather, trail conditions, meetings, wildlife reports. Yet Noah began noticing a pattern. Certain places appeared repeatedly. Certain locations received far more attention than others. One area in particular, the eastern boundary of Black Pine, the same region connected to the disputed land surveys, the same region connected to Harold Grayson, the same region mentioned in Jacob's final journal entries. Noah spread several maps across the table and compared them. Then he noticed something unusual. A pencil mark, faint, almost invisible. Someone had circled a location near an old fire lookout tower that no longer existed. Noah checked another map. The same circle appeared there too. Then a third map. Again. His pulse quickened. This wasn't random. Jacob had been marking something. The next morning, Noah set out before sunrise. The location sat nearly 6 miles from the cabin. Most of the route followed overgrown trails. Several sections had disappeared entirely beneath decades of forest growth. By midday, he reached a ridge overlooking a narrow valley. According to the maps, the old lookout tower once stood somewhere nearby. The tower itself was gone. Only a few concrete footings remained. Noah spent an hour searching the area. Nothing. Another hour. Still nothing. Frustration slowly replaced excitement. Maybe he had misunderstood the maps. Maybe the circle meant something else. Maybe there was nothing here at all. Then the yellow dog appeared. Noah hadn't seen the animal since leaving the cabin. Suddenly it emerged from the trees as if it had been following him all morning. Seriously, Noah laughed. The dog ignored him and continued toward the edge of the ridge. Then it stopped. Noah frowned. What? The dog looked back, then looked toward a cluster of rocks partially hidden beneath brush. Noah followed, mostly because he had no better idea. At first, the rocks seemed ordinary. Then he noticed metal, rusted metal protruding from beneath moss. He knelt beside it and cleared away leaves. A steel survey marker emerged. Old. Very old. Noah's heart began racing. He searched the surrounding area more carefully. Another marker appeared 20 feet away. Then another. Then another. They formed a line, a boundary line. The realization hit him immediately. These were the original survey markers, the genuine ones, the markers that established the original property boundary before later surveys changed everything. Noah examined the closest marker. Numbers remained visible despite decades of weather. He copied them into a notebook, then photographed them using an old disposable camera he had purchased in town. By late afternoon, he had documented nearly a dozen markers. More importantly, they contradicted the revised boundaries shown in later property records. Even Noah could see it. The original line and the revised line were nowhere near each other. Someone hadn't made a mistake. Someone had moved the border. The discovery should have felt like a victory. Instead, it raised an obvious question. If the original markers still existed, why hadn't anyone found them sooner? That evening, Noah returned to the cabin exhausted, yet his excitement vanished the moment he stepped onto the porch. The front door stood open, wide open. His stomach dropped. Noah knew he had locked it. He approached cautiously. The yellow dog growled softly beside him, a low warning sound. Inside, the cabin looked untouched at first glance. Then Noah noticed the table. All the maps had been moved, not stolen, moved. Somebody had searched them. A chair had been knocked over. One drawer hung open. Noah immediately rushed to the loose floorboard where he hid the most important documents. Empty. His breath caught. For several terrifying seconds, he thought everything was gone. Then he noticed something strange. The hidden compartment itself remained untouched. Whoever searched the cabin hadn't found it. Relief washed over him, followed immediately by anger. Somebody had entered his home. Again. This time they had searched more aggressively, more desperately. The realization changed something inside him. Until now, he had been reacting, following clues, asking questions, letting events happen around him. Not anymore. Whoever these people were, they were scared. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep returning. Otherwise, they wouldn't risk searching a forgotten cabin hidden deep inside Black Pine. Fear made people sloppy. Desperation made people make mistakes. Noah sat beside the stove and thought about everything he had learned. The survey markers, the altered boundaries, the missing journal pages, the repeated break-ins. Slowly, a picture emerged. Jacob Carter had discovered evidence of fraud. He had documented it. He had hidden it. Then he disappeared. 40 years later, someone was still trying to erase what remained, which meant the truth still mattered. The next morning, Noah returned to town and visited Eleanor. He showed her the photographs of the original survey markers. The old ranger studied them carefully. Then she sat down without saying a word. "You know what these mean?" Noah asked. Eleanor nodded slowly. "Yes." "What?" She looked directly at him. "They proved Jacob was right." The statement hung in the air. Noah felt a chill run through him. Can they prove the land was stolen? Eleanor didn't answer immediately. Instead, she crossed the room and opened a small filing cabinet. After several moments, she removed a yellowed folder. "I hoped I would never need this," she said quietly. Noah opened the folder. Inside sat copies of letters exchanged between Jacob Carter and a state investigator. Official letters, detailed letters, letters discussing evidence, witnesses, survey records. Then Noah reached the final page. Attached to it was a list of names: surveyors, officials, land developers. One name sat at the top: Harold Grayson. Noah stared at it. "Jacob sent this." Eleanor nodded. A week before he disappeared, Noah's heartbeat accelerated. Then the investigator knew everything. Not everything. Eleanor pointed toward the empty space at the bottom of the page. The supporting evidence never arrived. Noah immediately understood. The missing pages, the missing proof, the final pieces Jacob had hidden somewhere inside Black Pine. The investigator received the accusation, but not the evidence necessary to prove it, which explained why the case died, why the truth vanished, why the land remained stolen. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Eleanor quietly said something Noah would never forget. "Your grandfather got close enough to scare them." Noah looked down at the documents spread across the table. The survey markers, the deeds, the journals, the letters. For the first time, he could almost see the entire story. Almost. One final piece remained missing. The proof Jacob Carter had been trying to protect. The proof powerful enough to make a respected ranger disappear. And somewhere, either in the cabin, the cellar, or deep within Black Pine itself, that final piece was still waiting to be found. Noah barely slept that night. The folder Eleanor had given him lay open on the table beside Jacob Carter's journals. The stove crackled softly. Wind brushed against the cabin walls. Somewhere outside, the yellow dog barked once before settling into silence. Yet Noah's attention remained fixed on one thought. The evidence Jacob had collected had never reached the investigator. The accusations existed. The names existed. The warnings existed. But the proof itself remained missing. 40 years of mystery rested on a single unanswered question. Where had Jacob hidden the final evidence? Shortly before sunrise, Noah climbed down into the cellar again. He had searched most of it already, every shelf, every crate, every cabinet. Yet now he viewed the room differently. He wasn't looking for documents anymore. He was looking for something important enough to risk a man's life. He began with the workbench. Every drawer came out completely. Every board was examined. Every compartment inspected. Hours passed. Dust coated his hands and clothes. By noon, he had found nothing new. Frustration slowly returned. He sat on the floor beside the wall where the shelves met the staircase, the same place where he had spent countless evenings reading Jacob's journals. For several minutes, he simply stared. Then he noticed something strange. One section of shelving extended slightly farther than the others. Not much. Less than an inch. Most people would never have noticed. Noah almost didn't. Curiosity pulled him closer. He ran his hand along the wood. The surface felt smooth. Then his fingers touched something metallic hidden beneath the lower edge. A latch. Tiny, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Noah's pulse quickened. Carefully, he pressed it. A click echoed through the cellar. Then part of the shelf shifted outward. Noah froze. For several seconds, he simply stared. Behind the shelf sat a narrow hidden compartment, smaller than expected, barely large enough to hold a few boxes. Yet immediately he knew. This felt different. This felt intentional. Inside rested a weatherproof metal case. Unlike everything else in the cellar, the case looked professionally sealed. Noah lifted it carefully onto the workbench. The lid resisted at first, then opened. His breath caught. Inside sat dozens of documents. Original survey records, signed statements, property maps, photographs, legal correspondence. Everything organized with meticulous care. Everything preserved. Everything labeled. The evidence wasn't partial. It wasn't incomplete. It was overwhelming. Noah spent hours reading. The deeper he went, the clearer the story became. Jacob Carter had discovered a coordinated scheme involving altered surveys and fraudulent boundary revisions. Entire families had lost land. Property ownership had shifted. Valuable forest acreage had quietly changed hands. The evidence connected surveyors, developers, and county officials. Most importantly, It connected Harold Grayson directly to the operation. Several signed documents proved he knew exactly what had happened. Noah finally understood why the evidence had never surfaced. If these records became public in 1982, careers would have ended, fortunes would have disappeared, powerful people would have faced criminal charges. Jacob hadn't vanished because of a misunderstanding. He had gotten too close to the truth. Near the bottom of the case sat a large envelope. Unlike everything else, it contained no legal documents, only letters. Noah carefully removed them. The first letter carried Eleanor's name. The second was addressed to the state investigator. Several others were addressed to local families whose land had been taken. Then Noah found the final envelope. The handwriting immediately stopped him. To the carter who finds this. For several seconds, he couldn't breathe. Slowly, he opened it. The paper inside had yellowed with age, yet the handwriting remained clear. If you are reading this, then the truth survived longer than I did. Noah swallowed hard. The words blurred briefly before he continued. I don't know who you are. I don't know how many years have passed. But if you carry the Carter name, then you deserve to know something. None of this was ever about land. It was never about money. It was about people. The forest belongs to those who protect it, not those who exploit it. Noah read every line slowly. Jacob wrote about responsibility, integrity, community. He wrote about mistakes he had made. He wrote about hope. Most surprisingly, he wrote about family. The final paragraph hit hardest. If our family ever finds its way back here, I hope they understand that a good life is not measured by what you own. It is measured by what you leave behind. Noah lowered the letter. For a long time, he simply sat there. The cellar felt unusually quiet. 40 years earlier, Jacob Carter had hidden this message, believing he might never return. Yet somehow it had reached exactly who he intended. Several weeks later, everything changed. Eleanor contacted legal organizations. The state investigator's office reopened the case. Journalists became interested almost immediately. The evidence proved impossible to ignore. Families whose land had been taken finally received answers. Survey records were corrected. Property disputes were re-examined. Harold Grayson never lived to see the outcome, but his reputation did. The truth finally reached the public. More importantly, Jacob Carter's name was cleared. The missing ranger was no longer remembered as a man who disappeared. He was remembered as a man who refused to abandon the truth. As autumn arrived, visitors slowly began returning to the old ranger cabin. Historians, former residents, families connected to the land disputes, each brought stories, memories, photographs, pieces of history thought lost forever. Noah listened to all of them. He discovered things about his family nobody had ever told him. He learned that his grandfather had helped build trails throughout Black Pine. He learned that local families once trusted Jacob enough to leave their children in his care. He learned that the Carter name had once meant something in this forest. One afternoon, months later, Noah stood on the cabin porch watching sunlight filter through the pines. The yellow dog rested nearby. Nobody knew where the animal had come from. By this point, nobody really cared. The dog had decided it belonged there, much like Noah. Earl Benson eventually joined him on the porch, carrying 2 fishing poles. You know, Earl said, settling into a chair, Jacob would have liked this. Noah smiled. You think so? Earl looked around at the restored cabin, the repaired porch, and the forest stretching beyond the trees. I know so. For a while, neither spoke. They didn't need to. The forest filled the silence. Wind moved through the branches. Birds called in the distance. Water flowed through the creek below the hill. The same sounds Jacob Carter had heard decades earlier. The same sounds Noah heard now. Eventually, Earl nodded toward the cabin. What are you going to do with the place? Noah looked at the building. His home. His refuge. The place that had found him when he had nowhere left to go. Keep it open, he said. For who? Noah thought about that, then smiled. Anybody who needs it. Earl laughed quietly. Definitely a Carter. Years later, visitors to Black Pine National Forest would stop at a small restored ranger station tucked among the pines. Inside, they would find photographs, journals, maps, and a plaque dedicated to Jacob Carter. Many would read the story and move on. Others would stay longer. Some would sit on the porch and watch the forest. A few would notice another name beneath Jacob's. Noah Carter. Caretaker. But Noah liked a different plaque better. It stood near the entrance, beneath a simple wooden sign. The words came from the letter hidden inside the cellar. The forest belongs to those who protect it. Every time Noah passed the sign, he thought about the night he was thrown out with nothing but a backpack, a pocket knife, and $37. Back then, he believed he had lost everything. He never imagined that deep inside an abandoned ranger cabin, beneath a hidden cellar and 40 years of silence, an entire family legacy had been waiting for him to come home.